see in a couple of weeks.
Okay, about a minute ago before we start, and you probably spot the typo on this webinar's slide. Down at the bottom, the 8th of June should say the 8th of July. Oops. Okay, so I've got it at 7 o'clock. Are you okay, Roger?
Yeah, more or less.
Date with your medication and everything, yeah?
Yep, yeah. I've got
Okay,
everything.
brilliant. Well, hello everybody. My name's Carl. I'm a BIBBA trustee, and Roger's here, also a BIBBA trustee, and we are doing a small sort of group of webinars to see how it goes. We're now officially experts because we've done it once and we seem to have got away with it. There's only one small problem. We did the last one with 4 days notice and ended up with 380 attendees. So Roger now thinks he's popular, which is causing all sorts of problems, as you can probably imagine. Now, tonight's session is on nukes. I'm a big fan of nukes for a whole host of reasons, so it'll be good to hear about this. And I won't do much of an introduction to Roger. He's a bit of a sort of household institution. He's been keeping bees for as long as I've been alive, so at least 21 years, and probably in the easy years of beekeeping when it was legal to have a haircut and to attend a bee meeting, the good old days. Yeah. Anyway, tonight's session will be on two-frame nukes, and what we'll do is allow Roger to go through that. But just one or two things, if you don't mind. If you know much about Zoom, you can hover your mouse over the right-hand side, and there will be a chance to ask questions. Someone's asked a question already, and what we'll do is use some of those questions to pose to Roger at the end. We'll try to make as many of those as possible. Other than that, we'll aim for about an hour. If it goes over slightly, we do apologise, but that will be because there's content to get through and maybe some questions. But I hope you enjoy it. So over to Roger.
Right, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Carl. Good evening, everybody. Let's hope I can share my screen with you from the beginning. Yeah, here we are. Okay, so the two-frame nuke, but as I normally do, I let people know that I've had a book published a few years, Beekeeping a Practical Guide. Be careful, because if you want to purchase it, there's actually another one of the same title. Most of you probably know that I now own and run Dave Cushman's website, which Dave left to me in his will when he died 9 years ago now. and I'm trying to run it in exactly the same way that that Dave did. There's masses and masses of information on there, and it's used by a lot of beekeepers. I've put Nell and Rosie up here because every webinar I've done this year, I've had people say, "Where's Nell?" Who's the one on the right? She's the older one. She's 11 in a couple of weeks, and young Rosie is just over 2. They're not with me at the moment. They're on holiday. They'll be back tomorrow. So the two-frame nuke then. I've used it myself for over 40 years, well over 40 years, in fact. And it's something that I sort of hit upon by accident. There's nothing special about it. It's just one of those things that sort of works. You won't find it in books. Well, you might find it in one of my new ones that I'm in the process of writing at the moment. So it's not a common method of doing things. I've been told by some of the really clever beekeepers that it is too small. Well, give it about an hour and I'll let you actually make the judgment on that. It really does need understanding, and that's probably one of the issues that some of these people who are telling me it's too small have. It does need understanding, seriously, and you'll be able to pick up one or two things on the way through that you really do need to understand. What I do know is that it works, or largely it works. Like everything else in beekeeping, sometimes you get something goes wrong, and I'll be mentioning some of those times a little bit later. I really like it because it's very economical on bees. Effectively, all you need is just one frame of bees, and that's it really, and frame of brood. You can remove the queen and insert a queen cell, so you can use it for raising queens if you want to. It really does build up rapidly, and in the early stages it builds up in bursts, which I will explain to you later on, but it's something you must be aware of. It can build up very, very quickly, as I say, and you need to transfer it into a full hive quite quickly. You can use it to populate other nukes if you want to. You can do all sorts of things like you can with a normal nuke. You can move positions to pick up flying bees, or perhaps later on, after a few weeks, you make other nukes out of it. It really is very versatile. Now, the great thing about it is it suits all beekeepers, because even if you've only got one colony, you can use this. If you've got 1,000 colonies, you can still use it. It is very flexible, and the more experienced among you will probably at the end of the day think, cool, that's a bit similar to something I do. If I just tweak what I do, this will fit into it. So it really is very flexible. And the great thing about it is as well that you can repeat it throughout the season from the same colony. So you can regularly take nukes off a strong colony. What we're talking about, of course, is increase. And I see the increase as two separate aspects, really. One is a permanent increase and the other is temporary. So the permanent increase, then why? Well, it could be if you want more colonies, perhaps planned increase, perhaps a smaller beekeeper has got 2 colonies, wants to get up to 6 or 8 or 10, or perhaps somebody who's got 10 or 20 colonies wants to get up to 100. You can do it quite easily. You can do it quite quickly, and without much real cost. Or perhaps use it for making up winter losses. It always amazes me that most beekeepers have winter losses. When do they make their make good their losses? They usually do it in the spring, don't they? Well, that's the time when you really need your colonies as strong as you possibly can. So why not make up the winter losses before you had them? the previous summer or the autumn. And if perhaps you get 10, 15, 20% losses on a regular basis, why not just put 25% extra colonies in the winter? So perhaps if you want to run on 4 colonies, if you're going to lose one during the winter, you're down to 3. You've then got to make it up in the spring. But if you put 5 into winter, you'll probably come down to the 4 that you want. And as I've already mentioned, and you'll see as we go through, with this system, there really is little cost to it. Now, the temporary increase could be perhaps for management reasons, colony management, apiary management, call it whatever you like. Could perhaps be queen mating. So perhaps if you are interested in queen rearing and you want to get queens mated throughout the summer, you can do that in a little nucleus like this. Perhaps swarm prevention and control. Perhaps you think you take a frame of brood away from a colony that looks perhaps strong enough to swarm. It might just delay swarming, or perhaps you can come up with a swarm control method that that will allow you to take brooding bees away as well. With a modification of what I'm going to tell you, you could perhaps use it to keep a good queen. So perhaps a good queen's decided that, or the colony's decided they're going to swarm. Your swarm control method means replacing the queen. You need to do something with her. You don't want to put your boot on her, so put her in a little nucleus. Now, if you get too many of them, you may decide to reduce them later in the season. Well, of course, it's no real problem uniting them back to what you want. And of course, you can possibly dispose of them. Perhaps you feel a bit sympathetic to some of the newer beekeepers, so perhaps you can give them a nucleus, or perhaps sell them. And what I've noticed in my years of beekeeping is that more and more, or they're getting more and more beekeepers who aren't that keen on producing honey. Well, why not just produce bees? If you can get a nucleus or a couple of nucleus out of a colony in a year, that's probably 250, 300 pound. And if you don't like producing honey, it's as equivalent to sort of 40 or 50 pound of honey sale, isn't it? So making up a nucleus, and 2-frame nuke in particular, what do you need to know then? Well, as with everything in beekeeping, you need a sound knowledge of what I call the basics, the simple sort of stuff, life cycles, what happens in a colony when it's preparing to swarm, disease diagnosis, all sorts of things, like simple things that all beekeepers need to know that are factual. Bees from 2 colonies, if you put them together, will probably fight, not always. At the moment in my area where we've got a massive nectar flow on, you can do almost anything with bees. But if you've got a nectar dearth, you very definitely can't. Usually bees from 3 or more colonies, if you put them together, let's say we make up a 4-comb nuke with 4 frames of bees, 1 from each colony, in general, they won't fight. If you do have problems, remember that bees, if they're exposed to light for about 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour, they don't fight. So perhaps if you have a couple of empty brood boxes, space the frames of bees out, and then you can put them together after about a quarter of an hour. In general, returning foragers don't fight, and young bees don't fight either. If you make a nuke or any colony up on site and leave it there, the flying bees are going to return home. So you've got to make sure that you put enough extra bees in to cover the combs that the departing bees would have covered. Non-flying bees will struggle to defend themselves. Now that doesn't matter too much in a nectar flow, but in a nectar dearth, of course, you get robbers around. So if that's the case, close up the entrance as best as you can. And if you're putting your nuke into a full brood chamber, put it on a narrow entrance and then put the bees right by the entrance, not over to the side of the box. I don't like feeding bees during the summer at the best of times, but there seems to be a modern culture of feed, and if you're in any doubt, feed again. And especially if we're making up nukes too. I'm going to be giving our two-frame nuke a frame of food, so there's no need to feed. Don't feed nukes immediately after making them up. A colony, doesn't matter what size it up will build, what size it is, will build up much quicker if you give it comb rather than foundation. I'll be explaining that in greater detail in a minute. If you remove a queen from a colony, or you take frames away from a colony and leave the queen behind, if you've got larvae young enough, the bees will always build emergency cells. And of course, you need to be able to recognize disease, because what I'm going to be telling you to do, you're going to be moving combs around from one colony to another, and then perhaps sometimes back again too. So this slide, many of you have probably seen anyway, but I keep hammering away at the same message. If you get a frame like that with brood in all stages, usually the first one out of a colony, have a look at the sealed brood for signs of American foul brood, unsealed brood when they're just filling the cell for EFB at every inspection. So every colony you go to, the first frame you come across like that, do it. Make it habit, exactly the same as you would you light your smoke or you pick up a hive tool. So what do you need then? Well, a nuke box is fairly handy. I put a question mark there because you don't actually need one. If you haven't got one or you haven't got a spare one, that's okay. Just use a full brood box, put a entrance block in, and by the hole, make sure you put the bees fairly close to the hole so that they can defend it. Now, certainly in the early days, you'll have lost your flying bees. So they're going to struggle to defend it anyway. But after a day or two, they should be okay. You'll need frames of one description or another. I prefer comb. If you've only got foundation, foundation will do, but what I'm going to tell you will be retarded rather than if you put comb in. You need a queen cell, one frame of brood plus adhering bees, one frame of food, may or may be without, with or without bees. You need a bit of knowledge and gumption. Now, the knowledge is the basics that I'm telling you and what bees will do. A gumption is just really to make sure everything fits together. You obviously need observation and some lateral thinking too. It's not just a case of doing A, B, and C. You've really got to understand what's happening in the colony and then adjust whatever you're doing to sort it out. You also need two fingers, and I don't mean two fingers to thrust skywards, but two fingers to cross, because like all things in beekeeping, sometimes things go wrong. So how do I produce my brood combs? Again, it's something I've been doing for over 40 years. And all I do, I always work on a single brood chamber. There is a queen excluder there. What I do is get my brood combs built above a queen excluder in a brood chamber. So in that brood chamber, there will be 11 frames of foundation. Now, largely they will be worker, although I do have drone as well. Now, if you put worker comb immediately above a brood chamber, what happens is the bees in the middle 3, 4, perhaps 5 combs, might even be more sometimes, they will put pollen in. They don't put pollen in drone comb. So the super above, in fact, most of my supers have got a drone comb. If I have got worker, I tend to put them to the outside of the boxes. But these two will probably have, these two supers will probably have drone comb in the middle. Now, as soon as the bees start working on this foundation, I reverse them and put the brood chamber above. This is a different colony, but the brood chamber is now there with the super underneath. This is one that's in my garden at the moment. In fact, the photograph's only a couple of days old. The other one's probably 10, 12 years old, one on the left. So what's happening now is this super will be drone comb. The worker comb is far enough away from the brood that the bees will only put a tiny bit of pollen in there. The problem, of course, with pollen in combs you're going to extract is that you swear about it for a start, because it's a bit difficult to drag your uncapping knife through. It throws your extractor out of balance, and if you don't use the combs straight away, put them back on the bees, they go into the back of your shed and the pollen goes mouldy. So that's what I do. And the benefits of this are that the foundation doesn't go stale, because bees will only draw out foundation if they've got if they produce the wax. They can't produce the wax unless they've got some income with which to use as the raw material. So it's either going to be a nectar flow or feed. And as I've already said, I don't like feeding during the summer. So if you put foundation into a brood box and you get a week's bad weather, the bees just climb all over it and make it go all sort of as a sort of glaze they put on it. So if you get another week's bad weather, they start chewing holes in it. Out comes the sun, and they don't build a foundation as they should do. They tend to build it all sort of higgledy-piggledy all over the place. So you tend not to get, unless conditions are absolutely right, you tend not to get good combs if you put foundation in the brood box. So the bees draw comb out far better above the brood, above the queen excluder. There's nowhere near as many bees on the combs in the supers as there is in the brood chamber anyway. Once they build them out, you can uncap them nice and straight, and then you've got some beautiful combs that you can use, and they can be used instantly too. And queen will lay up almost straight away. She hasn't got to wait for the bees to build the foundation out. Therefore, you get a much quicker build up. Now, you've also got combs of food if needed. So if perhaps you get a nectar dearth for 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks, nukes are quite vulnerable. All small colonies are quite vulnerable in several respects. Food is one of them. Well, if they run a bit short, just take a comb out of one of these brood chambers that's been used as a super, and you can feed them straight away. You haven't got to chug off indoors, make up some syrup, wait for the evening, feed them, and then worry about robbing, because providing you don't take any bees with them, you can feed them straight away. And again, more flexibility. Now, this is looking down on the top of a brood chamber used as a super. Look how nice and straight those combs are. If they're uncapped nice and straight, then you get nice combs. Here's one that's come out. It's not me holding the comb because I'm taking the photograph, but that's in my apiary at the bottom of my garden a couple of years ago now, I suppose, something like that. But look how nice and full, well built and straight those combs are. And of course, you end up with that if you put that into a colony, so the queen's confronted with it. She'll be a lot happier than if you just give her a piece of stale old foundation. And it's much nicer having that than these, and an awful lot of beekeepers have got that. And you can have a look at that and you can say probably a quarter or a third of that comb is going to be absolutely useless. You may think there's no brood on there. There isn't, apart from just there's a supersedure cell. Now, if anyone tells you that queen cells aren't built on combs without brood, you can tell them I said so, and there's the evidence there. So the result of all this is we get some nice virgin comb, never been laid in, and make some brilliant combs, which is a really valuable commodity in any apiary at any time of the year. Well, not any time of the year, but any year. So if you get your foundation on early, I happen to be in an oilseed rape district, although it didn't flow, well, there wasn't that much this year, but certainly get it on early, put it on, well, early May in my area, end of April, early May, if you like. As I've already said, try and get a super running first if you possibly can, so you get the bees up to the queen excluder. I know some people aren't in a rape area. Well, then they've got to wait for their main flow. If you leave it too late, and it's beginning to get a little bit late now, the bees haven't got a chance to fully draw out all the combs. Once they're drawn, even if you don't use them straight away, they will store for some time, certainly 2 or 3 years, anything up to 5 years. The worst thing that can happen is a little bit of problem with lesser wax moth, unless, of course, you're daft enough to let the mice in. So the 2-frame nuke then. I knew we'd get round to it sooner or later. When to start? Well, it's going to vary depending on the country, because the part of the country rather, because I guess we've got people here from Cornwall. We've probably got people from right up north, Scotland, or even Northumberland or Cumbria or somewhere like that, or perhaps Ireland. You know, you could be a month out with any of those places, but really it's when you get queen cells available, preferably ripe, or if not ripe, fairly old. Rather not have unsealed ones if we can help it. So the 2-frame nuke then. There's a nuke box. What do we have? A frame of food. So this is one of the frames. That one is part food, part brood. Notice the brood is sealed, but there's enough food on that comb for a little colony for a couple of weeks. That's really what you're after. By choice, I probably wouldn't use that, but it's okay, you'll get away with it. Next to that, put a frame of sealed brood with the deering bees. Now, they don't have to come from the same colony. Don't worry about it. I know what I said about 2 bees from 2 colonies, but once you get to this point, you put it in there. All you do is pick up the nuke box and hammer it down on the ground half a dozen times, and you don't have problems with 2 colonies fighting. And there's something you won't find in books, and you probably won't pass an exam on it either, but it works. So because some of those bees that you're going to put in are going to fly home, you need to add young bees. Add young bees because, of course, they can't fly. But why do you do it? I know the usual tricks of shaking in extra bees. What they don't tell you is you need to look at the frame to actually see if you've got young bees on there in the first place. Because if you haven't, then they're all going to fly home. You really need to make sure that they are all young. Just have a look at them. You can tell if they're what's young bees and what's older ones. Lightly shaking a comb sounds wonderful, but even after keeping bees 57 years, I can get it wrong. And the reason is that they don't tell you is it's actually temperature reliant, because the cooler it is, the more everything hangs on. The warmer it is, the more everything flies off or falls off. So that's not a particularly good one either. There's two ones that I particularly like. Both a little more time consuming, but they're reliable. One is to put a board up against your nuke box. That is a sloping board, a little bit like if you put a board up for a swarm. Take some frames of bees from other colonies, minus a queen of course, and shake on the bottom of the board. What should happen is, and this is where you need your two fingers to be crossed, what should happen is flying bees will fly off home. The young bees, because they can't fly, will walk up the board into your box. So that's one way. Another way is take a strong colony, take your supers off, put the queen excluder back, put an empty brood box on top of that. Go to whatever colonies you like, it doesn't really matter. Get 2 frames of young unsealed brood. Old unsealed brood isn't any good. You need the young brood that the younger bees are feeding. Shake the bees off and the queen. Take a couple, 3 of those perhaps, put them in your empty box, put your super back on if you've got them, walk away and leave it for an hour, go back, and those bees, those frames should be covered with young bees. You can then shake them into your box here. So there's 2 ways of doing it that are much more reliable than the usual methods. Fill up with drawn comb. Where do you get the drawn comb from? Of course, out of the extractor. I'll mention again, that's really economical on bees, because really all you've done is you've taken a frame of brood and bees. Okay, you've shaken some in from somewhere else, but it's only really to replace what's flown home. That's a good food frame. I would probably prefer that myself rather than the one I showed you, but I showed you both, so because I did say it is flexible. That's absolutely fine, and that's going to keep a colony fed for some time. That's a nice frame of sealed brood. It's what, sort of 3/4 full perhaps. It's got a little bit of food on it, and it's probably round the edge of the sealed brood got some younger brood coming on. So that's absolutely fine. Either of those have been good, obviously with bees on. And when I say bees on, covered with bees, that's what I mean. If you can see the brood, in general, you haven't got enough bees in there. So something like that. That frame, if it's largely sealed brood, that would be absolutely fine. Now, oh, sorry, I should have gone back. If you're going to keep it in the same apiary, yes, add young bees. If you're going to take it 3 or more miles away, of course, there's absolutely no need to. A frame like that will be more than adequate. So now you need to manage the nuke, and it's not just a case of dumping it down the bottom of the garden and leaving it till it swarms, because swarm it's likely to. So this is what we got. give it a queen cell. I'll go through that a little bit in a minute. Now you need to make sure that it's been queenless for a few hours. I know about the usual theory that it takes a colony an hour to discover that it's queenless. Well, the smaller the colony, the quicker it is. But I would probably leave it 3 or 4 hours, something like that. So when you lift the lid off, you can hear them roaring, they're all fanning. That's the time to give a queen cell. If not, if perhaps it's either late in the evening or you're going away for a day or so, then of course you can protect it. I'm suggesting very strongly these days, with the queen problems I've been mentioning for the last approaching 20 years, there are very definitely problems with queens. Not all queen cells emerge, and some of them emerge with deformed wings. And of course, if they've got deformed wings, they can't fly. If they can't fly, they can't get out to get mated. So within 4 or 5 days, check to make sure that the virgin queen is there. As much as anything, it will give you practice at looking for queens. If she looks fine, okay, leave her there. But of course, if she has got a deformed wing, or sometimes they can have full wings, but one of them sticks out at an angle, 30 degrees, 45, perhaps sometimes 90 degrees. They very definitely can't fly. In fact, I've had one in the last couple of weeks like that. Right, so just check emergence. If it's a little bit longer than that, don't do it during the day. Do it either early in the morning or in the evening, just in case she's out on either an orientation flight or a mating flight. Now allow to expand. Now the clever bit comes where you need your lateral thinking and the gumption that I was telling you about, because that frame there, when you put it in, was a sealed brood. Sealed brood, that will be emerged in probably 10 to 12 days, something like that. Now, when you put the queen cell in there, it'll probably take a couple of days for her to emerge. It usually, but not always, usually takes about 5 days for her to sexually mature. If the weather's fine and she goes out to get mated straight away, it takes around about 3 days for her to come into lay. It's for the that's just biology. So around about 8 to 10 days from you putting the queen cell in there. Now I have had some this year, only 5 or 6 days. That is a rarity. I assume the warm weather's got something to do with it. Anyway, what's happened is that that frame of brood, when it emerges, don't forget you get 3 frames of bees. So that's covering the other 3 frames, plus what you've already got in there. That's almost filling that box up from really 1 frame of brood that's covered with bees. So this is where I say you need a bit of gumption to work out what's going to happen ahead of you. Now, when a queen starts laying, how long does it take her to fill up a British Standard brood comb? If you think about it, it's about 2 days, because 11 in a box and a 21-day life cycle. If they fill the whole lot up, it's effectively a frame every 2 days. So it isn't quite like this, but the queen comes back, and if everything is going right, she's got 4 frames here to lay up. 2 days for that one, 2 days for that one, 2 days for that one, 2 days for that one. 8 or 10 days after starting to lay, she's filled the box up. Now, move on 21 days. So it takes 2 days for one frame to emerge to become 3 frames of bees. 2 days later, we got the same happening with that one. 2 days after that, we got the same happening with that one. And 2 days later, the same happening with that one. So you get to a point that within about 10 days, what was fitting into a nice little 5-frame box, all of a sudden, it needs to go into a full box. So if you're a weekend beekeeper, you need to put this into a full-size box quicker than you think you do. And I'm being absolutely serious about this because even I still get caught out with these things. Anyway, I hope I've hammered home the rapidity with which these little colonies can almost explode. So that's what you end up with. Now, you need to check for food and space. Obviously, food shouldn't be too bad. It's the space that's really the issue. I will be talking about what can happen in a nectar flow in a few minutes, because that can also have a bad effect. Well, not a bad effect, can have an effect. So, what queen cells have we got? Well, that looks like being a pretty good natural queen cell to me. Okay, it's on the woodwork, but you can either perhaps use that frame, or you don't think you can slice down through here. You usually can't, because the wall between the cell and the wood is usually so thin you can't even separate with a razor blade. So just take a slither of wood away from here, and that queen cell will be absolutely fine. That is just about in the right condition. The bees haven't yet thinned down the end. My guess is that will probably be two days before emerging. Or perhaps if you've got a queen rearing program going, these are 10 that were photographed in my apiary yesterday. Luckily, I got 10 out of 10, but I did have to regraft, I think, 8, 9, and 10. So, you know, if you've got those, obviously use them. So, where to put them in? Well, if you've got somewhere 3 miles away, that's absolutely brilliant. You just leave them there for 3 weeks and then bring them back again. You haven't got to worry about bees flying home. You haven't got to worry about putting extra young bees in. They would do absolutely fine on their own. Oh, yeah, can I go back? When bees are expanding, is about 5 weeks after you make them up. That's when they really do need to go into a full box. Right. Yeah, 3 miles or more away for 3 weeks, but most people want to keep them at home. But talking about 3 miles away, there's getting quite a little group in my local association, Whisper Green, of beekeepers who are helping each other, and they're doing things like swapping nukes over, and that's great. That works really well. And of course, there's only one person got to do traveling. So let it build up. Inspect regularly for reasons that I've just said. You clearly need to know that the queen has started to lay. And you really do need to make sure that they have plenty of room. Transfer to full hive, preferably before time. So if you are just a weekend beekeeper, literally you can you wouldn't recognize a colony one weekend from the one you saw the previous weekend at the right time. Add drawn comb if possible rather than foundation, but that's entirely up to you. Now, I've already mentioned this can be repeated throughout the season because you can take a frame of sealed brood away from a colony probably every 3 weeks or so. In fact, I was only thinking about this today. I've never thought about it before. Perhaps if you replaced the frame you take out with another one, the queen will lay up that probably almost straight away. And she'll just go straight through. She'll probably spend 2 days on that comb. That means that you, in 3 weeks' time, you've got a comb that's well, 3 days away from emergence, something like that. So again, if you're a weekend beekeeper, that absolutely fits in a treat. Here's a photograph I took yesterday. That was a 2-frame nuke that was made up last Wednesday. So you can see on this comb here, they've already started putting the nectar in the comb. We've got a failed nectar flow on at the moment. So why use sealed brood? Well, it generates its own warmth, whereas unsealed brood needs bees to keep it warm. So you need a lot less bees to look after it. So perhaps if a few more go home than you thought, it's probably not so detrimental. I know people keep going on about chilled brood, but I've only ever seen it twice, if not 3 times in my beekeeping life. It really is quite rare. You've got to do something pretty daft if you have chilled brood. It doesn't need feeding because it's been fed, and unsealed brood, especially young unsealed brood, is incredibly hungry. So of course that will take away the food stores if there was nothing coming in. But all the feeding's been done, so it's just the adult bees that need feeding. When it emerges, of course, within 10 to 12 days, you've got laying room immediately for the young queen when she comes back and starts laying. Much quicker build up because you've got adult bees there a week or two earlier than if you just use a normal frame of brood in all stages. Repeat again that a frame of brood becomes 3 frames of bees. So within that 10 or 12 day period, all of a sudden you've got 3 times as many frames of bees as you had when you put the frame in there. Now, some possibilities for this. If you start early, and I started mine this year at the last week in April. Certainly in Sussex, you can quite easily get 3 mated queens through one of these nukes during the summer. Quite what it's like if you go further up country, I don't know. You might just about get 3 in, but you'll certainly get 2 anyway. You can move positions because your first nuke builds up very, very quickly. The position you put that in, if you put your second nuke in that position, you haven't got to worry about bees flying home because you're relying on the flying bees of the one previous to that filling up the box. On many occasions, I've built these up during the summer. I've made lots of uses of them at the same time, but I haven't fed them because they've really got their own. So if you overwinter it, all you've got are 11 frames, and you need them anyway. So there's absolutely no cost to it. Now, great thing is that these colonies, they've all got new combs because that's what you put in the supers either earlier in the year or the previous year. They haven't been laid in, so you could have all your bee or most of your bees on new combs if you want them. Already mentioned making other nukes from them, but certainly after 5 or 6 weeks, you can make 2-frame nukes out of your earlier 2-frame nukes. And I suppose I've done that half a dozen times this year already. You know, certainly a couple of weeks ago I was doing it. Now, from a beekeeping association's point of view, instead of buying nukes from commercial sources with all the expense and the possibility of ending up with imported queens, a beekeeping association can make up nukes for beginners this way, and it's a great teaching aid as well, showing people how to make up nukes and then the development of them. Brilliant way of doing it. If you've got a queenless colony, you can use it for uniting rather than just putting a queen in, especially if you've had a colony that's queenless for some time, because they don't always accept fertile queens. The limitations, folks, are you, the beekeeper. There's just so many things you can do with this. And you can overwinter queens if you want to, rather than buy them. And I know there's a great view these days, you must have early queens. Well, you've got them. Here they are. You bred them yourself last year at a local stock. They cost you virtually nothing, and they're there ready to go, and you know they're going to be okay. And you know they're going to suit the district because they've already survived one winter. Now, a couple of problems. If the queen fails, which they're likely to, whatever you do, all you do is just take another frame of sealed brood from another colony, shake the bees off, because of course you've already got bees in your nuke, shake the bees off and insert that, add another queen cell, and really all you're doing is putting things back a couple of weeks. That's all. It's not disastrous. Of course, you've got to work out that the colony is queenless at a fairly early stage. And one way of checking that is, I did this on last Wednesday, I think. Not quite as a joke, but I had somebody else with me. We were managing the bees at Whisper Green Teach in April. I had a little colony that was queenless. I had a queen in a cage. She just put a cage over the top. Immediately the bees just climbed all over it. Now, I've done it since. If you put an empty cage down, especially a new one, you might just get the odd bee over it. So that is a quick and easy way of determining if a colony is a queenless or queen right. Now, another slight problem you get is if you get a nectar flow, because of course you haven't got the young brood to use up the food as normal, so bees have got to store it. They haven't got a super. They got 4 empty combs here, so what do? They fill that up, don't they? And it's not a problem. Don't worry about it. All you do is remove it, shake the bees off, and if the queen hasn't laid in, what you can do is put those combs in a brood chamber that's been used as a super, and replace with some empty combs from somewhere else, and the queen should be starting to lay in there almost straight away. So I mean that's a positive problem. Don't worry about that. And this is one that's happened this year. There's a comb that the bees have basically just filled up with nectar, and they started sealing it. Look, lovely white cappings. There's another one. Now, strangely, the honey or the nectar in the middle is darker than that around the outside. Quite what happened there, I've no idea, but that's it. So details of this are on Dave Cushman's website, and that's it. Question time, please.
Brilliant. Right, let's have a go and do that. Come on. Just trying to turn my camera on. Oh, there you go. Hi.
Oh no, not you again.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'm the spokesperson with the
How
question.
How long did that last?
Uh,
50 minutes. Yeah.
we've got
Okay.
7 minutes left, so
Well, 7 minutes, a bit more.
yeah, okay. Some questions.
Are there still people out there?
There are, yeah, more than 250,000. Yep. Some good questions. I'll try to pick them in some sort of logical order. Can you, if you don't have a queen cell, can you just put young eggs and larvae into a nuke?
Yes, you can do. You need to make sure you've got quite a lot of bees in there. I know there's a view that you've got to have really strong colonies to produce queen cells. In fact, you haven't. Providing the combs are well covered with bees, you're okay. Over the years, I've produced some cracking queens with a small number of bees. I think it's basically overplayed by people who don't look at their bees very often, if you get what I mean. Yeah, you could do. What other way? Yeah, I'm actually working on something at the moment that you know about, Carl. I'm not going to tell anybody about it yet, but it's a way of producing queen cells for the small beekeeper, and I think that will cover it. I've had mixed success today, but I'm quite hopeful.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, let me see what you could do. Yeah, I think probably I'd put an extra frame of brood and bees in rather than just one.
If you don't have a queen cell available. Yeah.
If you don't have a queen cell available, yeah. So really a 3-frame nuke.
Okay. Next question.
Yeah. Are you able to get back to the beekeeper? I'm wondering why they asked it. Is it just because they want to do it early, or is it for another reason?
Oh,
probably they might.
There's a lot of questions, so I can't spend too much time. But
yeah. Okay, yeah, I think we spend a little bit of time on it because it might be somebody who's only got a small number of colonies, and if they don't put up queen cells, of course they can't do it. So we need to help people. But yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you are lucky enough to have a queen cell, whereabouts do you put it in a nuke?
If you put it preferably in the middle of the brood, if you can, especially if you've got bees that are likely to fly home. If you've got a nuke that's been there 3 or 4 days, then you know how big the colony is going to be, and you can put it right on the edge, right close to the woodwork. Very often you get a gap between the comb and you know, I in fact even today I've put some in there, but the nukes have been up and running 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay. And the queen cell can come from any colony at all, can it?
I'll be talking about queen cells, I think, Friday, isn't it?
It is Friday, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll probably be touching a bit on that then. Really need to come from a good colony, unless you want to get the nuke. If the nuke's more important than the type of the bees you've got, the quality of the bees, then make the nuke, because you can always requeen it later. Yeah. So yeah, don't worry too much about it. it's at that point, I suppose, whatever you've got. If you've got 10 or 20 colonies, you're likely to have queen cells in some decent colonies. If you've only got a couple, one's much better than the other, and the poor one puts up the queen cells, then you've got a little bit of a problem, haven't you?
Okay, running close on time now. Just a couple more questions. You mentioned to be careful about the nuke filling up quickly with eggs. Is there any logic to having a brood box as your nuke box rather than, say, a six-frame nuke box?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's whatever you've got. What I didn't say, perhaps I should have done, is that well, two things. Firstly, you don't need a nuke box at all. I've done it on many occasions, straight into a brood box.
Brood box, yeah, I do.
But
yeah.
I find nuke boxes so useful that I try to free them up if I can. So even once they're up to perhaps 4 or 5 frames, I will probably put them in a full box straight away, because then I've got the nuke box that I can use for other things.
Okay. And the final question for tonight, because time is getting on.
Well, I'm happy to keep going if the others are. I don't mind.
No, they won't be interested in listening to you at all. Really.
You don't think so?
It's been a struggle for them to get this far. What does a young bee look like?
Crikey. Have a look at one that's coming out of, it's emerging from a cell, and you'll see that it's sort of grey and downy.
Yeah.
And if you hold, I don't know if I can show it here. Can they see me, or are they just saying? If you hold a frame like that and look down the surface of it at a bit of an angle, you see all these little grey bees bobbling about, and you can tell quite easily if you've got young bees on there. Young bees as well have generally got their wings close together like that, whereas the excuse this, but whereas older bees, their wings are further apart, and sometimes they're tattered around the edges as well.
Okay, that will do, Roger. That's brilliant. Thank you so much again for all these insights. I hope you enjoyed it, everybody. The webinar has been recorded, and a link to the recording will be on the BIBBA website in the next day or so. So by all means, please visit there to see what's up and coming. There's 4 more webinars coming. Next one's on Friday. Again, the details are on the BIBBA website, bibba.com, and by all means have a look. They're free to everybody. Roger's making a sterling effort trying to help with training and education in these days of lockdown and not being able to get out to apiaries or beekeeping meetings. So thank you once again, Roger, and sorry I couldn't answer all the questions. They were coming in thick and fast at the end, and hopefully see some more of you on Friday. Thank you.
Okay, Friday.
Right.
Okay,
Bye.
good night, everyone.